I don't think my fingers move that fast. And I know they wouldn't make that much sense on a piano. Thank you, that was lovely. Thank you, Martin. Martin Horn. One of these days we're going to convince him to do a CD so we can take him home with us. Huh? We have one? All right. We have a book. We have a CD of Martin in the bookstore. Good. So is this Michael? No. I love this. The topic today is communion with Spirit. And so I can't commune with you this way. I can only commune with you over here. And I love it because have you ever had that experience of where you kind of feel like you're trying to communion with Spirit and you're not quite connected? Yeah. Fortunately, however, as always, there's always another way. And so if one way of communing with Spirit doesn't work, another way does work. And so we just have to make sure that we keep on not being like that fly who keeps on bouncing against the same window when there's an open door right next to it. It's like, we need to do something different. So we've been looking this whole year at the idea of creating a world that works for all. Creating a world that works for all. Isn't that a great concept, a great visual to hold for us? Especially at this time, this election year, to hold that as a world that works for all. And it's not just our church, it's many of the religious science churches around the world are holding this same visual and this same talk series all the way through the year. So it's a building of consciousness, it's a growing of our consciousness together. And we know that wherever two or more are gathered with the same intent, there's a greater power. So I invite you to continue to join in that idea of a world that works for all. So today we're looking at communion with God. And this comes out of the Global Heart Vision, which simply says we see a world in which spiritual guidance is valued. I don't know about you, but there's times that I haven't valued spiritual guidance, and I usually know those times because I get off track pretty darn quickly, right? You've probably experienced, when, if I'm listening to Spirit, if I'm letting myself be guided, my mouth speaks well, my actions work well, all that stuff. And when I forget and when I'm not guided by Spirit, stuff starts getting out of whack pretty quickly, right? Maybe somebody else has experienced that. Maybe it's just me, but. So communion, the word communion is from the Latin communio, and it means mutual participation. Mutual participation. So it isn't one side or the other, it's mutual participation. So in order to have a communion with God, who has to participate? Yeah, God and us. Me and God. And so the mutual participation, we ask the question of, at what level do we have this mutual participation? If I want to have a mutual participation with you or with somebody or with Spirit, do I just have a light little surface communication participation? Or do I want to get jiggy with it, as Will Smith likes to say? Do I want to get deep into it? And I know that for the communion with the divine, or the communion with God, is something that I want to get deep into. And so there's some guides for doing this. And a couple of them come out of the Bible, and so we're going to take a look at those, and then we're going to take a look at one out of the Bhagavad Gita. Out of the Bible, it says in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, I am the Lord thy God, and you shall have no other gods but me. It's in Exodus 20-2. Most of you have heard that one or some variation on that, right? Okay. Second quote is actually from our reading this morning that Jesus is saying, and when Jesus is saying this, some people have come up to him and said, they're always kind of testing him every once in a while. And so they say, what's the greatest commandment? Because if you've ever studied, the Old Testament and Levitican law and all that stuff, there's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of laws, And so they're kind of like, which is the greatest one? And no, I'm not going to say that joke. Never mind. So he basically responds to him. If you're an NCIS fan, you'll know what a Gibbs head slap is. That one right there. And so he kind of wakes him up. He kind of gives him a little whack in the head because he's quoting directly from Deuteronomy. when he says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one God, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your might. This is the first commandment." That's a direct quote of Deuteronomy. He's just reminding them of what they already know. Okay? So we're going to take a look at those, and I want to break those down in a minute. We're also going to take a look at a wonderful quote from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, verse 16. "Ignorance is destroyed by knowledge of the self," and that's the capital S self. "Ignorance is destroyed by the knowledge of the self within. The light of this knowledge shines like the sun, revealing the supreme Brahman. Those who cast off sin," which is misunderstanding, "those who cast off sin through this knowledge, absorbed in the Lord and established in him as their one goal and one refuge, are not reborn as separate creatures." Okay? So let's take a look at those and break those down to see how do they apply? What do they mean to us? So the first one, "No other gods but me." When I was young and I first heard that, my first thought was, that's a jealous little guy. Petty little tyrant. Yeah, I'm your God and you can't have anybody else but me. Okay? I've met people like that. You know, hey, it's just me. It's all about me. Okay? Once in a while, I've been people like that. But what I came to learn is there are multiple levels of this teaching. And so you have to understand that when this guidance was given to the Israelites, they were a fairly primitive tribe, and they needed some just, here's how you do it. Okay? There's times in our life where we need just, here's how you do it. Okay? You know, we tell a 3-year-old child or a 2-year-old child, do not run in the street. We don't explain the reasons why in great depth, right? You know, let me tell you about the law of gravity and explain to you why it is not wise to jump off of a 10-story, balcony, okay? We don't do that. We just say, don't go close to that balcony. So this is kind of how those guidelines are on one level. But they're always for a deeper purpose. They're always for a deeper purpose. And so the deeper level of understanding of this "no other gods but me" is the same thing that Jesus talks about when he says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all else shall be added unto you." So it's an understanding that our consciousness is cause. What it is that I put my attention on is cause. It's the first thing that I create from. And if I have what have been called false gods, if I'm looking at stuff other than this infinite presence that is the supreme love, the abundant good, the wholeness and the wisdom of the universe, if I'm looking at something other than that and going there first, I'm honoring a false god. And it doesn't work, does it? Because if what I put my attention on is what grows, and I'm putting my attention on fear, and if I'm putting my attention on lack, if I'm saying that other person is my source of either happiness or sorrow, okay, I'm focusing on that and I'm creating them as my focus instead of saying, wait, I'm going to focus on God. Emmett Fox, a great New Thought writer, says you can solve all your problems by just thinking about God instead. And why is that? Because God is all the things that we want. God is the good. God is the love. God is the wholeness. God is the abundant wealth of the universe, the opulence of the universe. God is the health and the wholeness and the life energy, the light, the love, the vibrant joy of the universe. That's what God is. And so if I start putting my attention on that instead of what it is that I'm afraid of, that is what grows in my life. Okay? And so then I don't have false gods before me. I have this one source, and I'm putting my source, my focus, my concentration, my attention on that, not because God is jealous, but because that's how the universe works. Yeah? So that's what that is about. Stop believing in things other than this one infinite presence. And those things are what we already talked about, outer circumstances. I can get wrapped up in outer circumstances quite easily. Look at this stuff happening over here. Look at my checkbook. Look at my diagnosis that I've got from the doctor. Look at, all this stuff, okay? Look, and then I can get caught up in what other people are doing. Well, look what that person said to me, and I sure hope this person gets elected because they're my source of happiness and joy, right? And all that stuff. Guess what? They're not. They're not. God is our source. And the other place where we get a false God is we believe in ourselves as being separate from that divine guidance. Hey, I can do it myself. I don't need God. I'll figure this out. I was working with a friend of mine the other day in a session, and she goes, I'll figure this out. I said, stop, time out. If you could figure this out, you already would have, because you've been working on this for years. Okay? It's time to let God figure it out. It's time to just simply say, let God figure it out. After the first service, one of the things I'll invite you to do later is we're going to contemplate the divine. And after the first service, I had a congregant who shared with me, and I'm going to preface this teaching by saying that our founder, Ernest Holmes, says that this teaching is for human needs and aspirations. It's not just for the highest, loftiest, most lovely stuff. It's for every detail, okay? So this guy has a boat that the engine wasn't working on quite right, and he needed to get a new engine to put in his boat. This is highly mystical, right? Okay, but it is. And so he went off. He found an engine that would work. It was in a car, and he went off to do it. And he had no idea. He drove a kind of a car that the engine would not fit into if he got it out of the car. Okay, but he goes over to the car anyways. He has a friend. He finds out a friend. He goes to a friend who says, "I can't help you, but I know a guy who can." Okay, and so this young kid comes along to help him, to take the engine out, and they're both stuck. They've been working on this engine for several hours, can't get it undone, and this young kid, younger than both of them, walks by and says, "Oh, I know how to do that." Crawls down underneath the car, shows him what a bolts undo and everything else, and he says, "Yeah, you want to stick it in my minivan?" And so they lift it out of the car, they stick it into this kid's minivan. The guy says, "Meet me on, such and such a place." They drop the thing into his minivan, they take it home, drop it into his garage. Now, he didn't know this person who had the minivan and the knowledge of how to get it out of there. He just started down the path, and he said, "I've been working on the contemplation of spirit." He says, "I've been inspired by your talk last week, and I've been working on the contemplation of spirit, and I just contemplated, and I said, Spirit knows how to make this happen." It's at that level. Because it's not enough to know that Spirit can make some beautiful, wonderful, cosmic thing can happen. It's how can Spirit get my engine to my boat, right? I mean, really, right? Don't you want a God who's practical and works on every little level of your life, right? If I've lost my car keys, don't you want to know that there's something within me that knows where everything is located? There's only one mind. It knows where everything is, and it will reveal that to me right here, right now, where my car keys are. This is the kind of God I want. Yeah, I want the big cosmic one that takes care of all the stars, galaxies, and stuff in the universe too, but I want one that's really deep, personal, and close. That's what I mean about communion with God. We're playing with a God that's right there in the details, okay, and playing with that. And so I don't want to put false gods before me because I want to be focused on this infinite presence that knows, If I'm putting the other stuff first, I'm cutting myself off from that power source. It's like I'm sitting here beside a spring of beautiful, clear, perfect water with a glass in my hand going, "I'm thirsty, I don't know where to get any water." Right there. But if I don't pay attention, if I don't connect, I got to dip the water in the glass in the spring, right? Okay, if I don't connect, nothing's going to happen. Not because the source has a problem, but because I don't connect with it. So the second one God. Love it with everything we have. And let's break that down. Love it with our soul. Our soul is our spiritual self. Our soul is that which is already in connection and communion with the divine. It's easy to love God from our soul. But the question is, do we take the time to connect again with that spiritual aspect of ourselves? If we're so busy doing, running around and not paying attention, or thinking, or feeling, and emoting, do we take the time to calm down and go with our soul, to contemplate at our soul level? So that's the first invitation from this passage. The second one then is our heart. Our heart, our emotions. See, some of us can get God as this wonderful spiritual being, or we can get God as this wonderful intellectual concept. We kind of do that sometimes in religious science. We get very mental with God, right? It's this infinite principle. There's love and law, and if we just work it right, it will work for us. But we don't get the passion, the joy, and the love of God. I was talking in the morning service, there's a yoga called Bhakti Yoga, which is the devotional yoga, where you're in love with the divine. Your heart's in it. You're best passionately in love with this infinite presence. And my invitation is that we start practicing some of that in our lives if we're not already doing it. To bring that love, to bring that emotion, to bring that feeling, our heart energy, into this communion with the divine. The third level then is our mind, our intellectual process. And on the plus side that helps guide and give structure to our emotions. And on the shadow side, it can be just the concept that we talked about. If we're just stuck in our heads and our intellect, we can know all about God. We can know that it's this stuff, but we don't connect still because we're just thinking about it. Okay? It's kind of like the yin-yang or the male-female energy. Okay, we got to connect both of them together. And then finally, love God with all your might. Your might is your body. Your might is your action. And so we can do this beautiful love of the divine, but unless we put it into form, unless we express it in action, nothing happens, right? You know, you may have been with a person that you say, you know, oh, I love you so much. And they go, ditto. How do you feel? Do you feel really loved? Really engaged? You know? You want that love to take action. You want that love to be informed. And you want this communion to be informed. And if you're doing that, then you start to move it into a whole different level of expression, and then it's out there. Because we're here to be conduits of the divine, openings to the divine, not just to be receptors and take it in and then sit on it. We're here to continue with the process of the divine love. Paul said faith without works is dead, and so is love. Love without works is dead. Our mother's love, the love of the mother, is a love with works, right? How many mothers do you know that theoretically love their babies or their children but do nothing? Does that work? Well, it doesn't work, right? So you have to love, you have to put it into action, you have to put it into form, you have to engage it, you have to put it to bring your might to it, to bring your body to it. The Bhagavad Gita, ignorance is destroyed by the knowledge of the self within. As soon as I start to turn within, wherever an area is that I'm ignorant, it shifts. It shifts. And I start to see, as they refer to it in the next sentence, the light. And it says literally, the light of this knowledge shines like the sun, revealing the Supreme Brahman. Once we start to focus on that, wherever we're ignorant, and we're all ignorant in some areas, right? I love Michael Beckwith's comment that I've used many times here, that all of us are asleep to some degree or another. Some of us are in a very deep sleep and voting for Trump. No, never mind. And voting for somebody who may not be too enlightened, whoever that is. Some of us are in a deep sleep and we're bumping into things unconsciously. And others of us are in a light sleep and we're aware that we're ignorant. I don't mean that as a political statement. It was actually more of a joke. But we're aware that we are ignorant. We're aware that we don't know everything. Okay? And so once we're in that state of being aware, we start to say, how can I learn more? We become open. We become curious. We become engaged. So ignorance is destroyed by knowledge of the self within. The light of this knowledge shines like the sun, revealing the Supreme Brahman, revealing the true nature of who we are and who this world is. We see ourselves and we see this out here differently when we are working with the self, when we are living in communion with Spirit. Those who cast off misunderstanding through this knowledge, absorbed in the Lord and established in him or her as their one goal and one refuge. So all I'm doing here is putting God first, putting this infinite presence first. This pure love, this pure wisdom, this pure intelligence first, are not reborn as separate creatures. Now you can take that as just talking about reincarnation, but the truth is we're reborn every moment. Principle is not bound by precedent. What came in the past is not what's going to have to happen in the future. Okay? We're new every time. We're constantly being reborn every minute. And to be reborn as separate creatures means that we feel separate from life. We feel separate from each other. We feel separate from our capital S self. Many of us have experienced that at some point in time in our lives. And it's not a good feeling, right? Okay? So what he says, what this Bhagavad Gita is saying here is that when we're absorbed in God, when we're absorbed in that communion with the divine, we are not living as separate creatures. We are living in a unified oneness. We're living in a unified wholeness, and we know it, and we experience it. So all this resonates with what I talked about last week, as far as that in order to be fully engaged, we can't just have an intellectual knowledge of it. We have to have a heart wisdom. We have to have a full engagement in spirit. And then that wisdom needs to be followed by an activity. There's a Hindu term called seva, which simply means serving spirit without thought of reward, without thought of result, without putting any attention to what am I accomplishing, what's my reward, what am I going to get out of it. It's just, I'm here to be, how can I serve? How can I serve? And that is the concept of seva. And it's a concept then of taking this communion with the divine and putting it out into the world. Putting it out into, how can I approach you as, how can I serve you? Instead of, what can I get from you? Michael Beckwith again talks about having a giving economy rather than a getting economy. And he's not talking about that we got to convince the world out there to change the economy. We each create our own economy, right? We each create our own weather around us, if you will. Okay? And so, are we living in a giving economy? Are we living in a getting economy in our own personal lives? This is an application also of that loving our neighbor as ourselves. And that's not loving your neighbor as much as yourself or kind of like yourself. It's loving your neighbor, recognizing that you and your neighbor are one. Your neighbor is yourself. And so when I love my neighbor as myself, then I am being of service. I'm saying, how can I serve you? Because if I'm trying to hurt you, who am I really hurting? I'm hurting myself. This goes back to the old saying of, whatever you do to the least of my brethren, you do also unto me. Okay? So we're all interconnected. So what I want to invite us to do this week is to make love to God. Make love with God. Good lovemaking is full participation, right? Both parties? Okay, a couple of you know this. It involves both parties being fully engaged. And what I want to invite us to do is that God is already engaged, okay? God is constantly making love to us. God is like that father in the story of the prodigal son who at any point in the story is in love with his son. At any point in the story, the son could have stepped out of whatever he was doing, come back to the home, and he would have been received with the party, new clothes, and the ring just as much as any other point in the story, right? The father is always in love with the son. The mother is always in love with the daughter, right? Okay? Even if you don't like what your kids are doing, you still love them, right? Yes? Okay, I got a bunch of moms in here. I know I do. Okay? No matter what your kid is doing, you still are in love with that kid. Absolutely in love with them. So this week, what I want to invite you to do is 3 things. Number 1, take some time for communion with Spirit. We get busy and we forget. Take time. Make the time to have a communion. It's like, if you're in a relationship, you got to make time for the relationship, right? Okay? I just sent my wife a little appointment thing. I want to have a date with her next Friday, and doing a particular activity. Okay? So you make it, you schedule it, you do that. How much more on the spiritual level? Do we make time to connect with God? Do we put it in our schedule? Do we actually sit down and do it, or stand and do it, or whatever, however process? So take the time to meditate. Take the time to vision. Vision is simply the process of asking questions of the divine and then listening for the answers. That's all visioning really is. Take the time to meditate, vision, and listen. Engage your whole being. Your whole being. Second practice is be aware of where you find it easy to commune with the Spirit and strengthen the areas where you find it maybe not so easy. So some of us are great in one area but not so much in the other. Take the time to practice and strengthen and get deeper in the other areas. And those 4 areas, again, were soul, heart, mind, and body, or the activity. Noticing which ones are easy for you and which ones you kind of go, that feels a little scary for me. And so begin to start to play with the area that feels scary. And the third practice is practice seva this week. Practice wherever you're at. How can I serve you? What can I give in this situation? It doesn't have to be anything big. It might be simply a smile to somebody that looks like they're not happy. It may be just making eye contact with that person holding the "will work for food" sign outside the parking lot. Just making connection. I see you as a human being. I recognize you as God in form. Okay? Just something. How can I serve you this week? How can I serve you in this moment? So that's to say that with no expectation of results or rewards. You're not expecting something to happen because of that. So that's our 3 spiritual practices. Take time for communion with Spirit, strengthen where it is that you may find it difficult to do that, and 3, practice Seva. Are you willing to play with that this week? Yes. Yeah, me too. I want to close with a quote again from the Bhagavad Gita. The ignorant work for their own profit. The wise work for the welfare of the world without thought for themselves. Perform all work carefully, that's with care, and guided by compassion. I invite us this week to, as we work, to ask, as we do, as we express, as we be in the world, to ask, how is this affecting the welfare of the world? We have that idea of how does this affect 7 generations down the road? How does what I'm doing affect 7 generations down the road? How does it affect the welfare of the world? And seeing a bigger picture as we start to express, as we start to live in this world. And then perform all work with care and with compassion. Play with that this week and see what happens in your life. Let's move into prayer. There is only one infinite presence, pure love, pure joy, pure good. We call it the Mother. We call it the Father. We call it the Tao. We call it the Buddha mind. We call it Allah. We call it God. It is all one. It is beyond all the names, but includes all the names. It is that infinite love. It is that pure good. It is that infinite joy. It is that life energy. It is that light within us and within all life. That is all there is. It is infinite. There is one. And because there is only that one, because it is all that there is, each of us is already one of that. We are within that already. There's no place outside of an infinite presence to be. And so we are immersed in this one energy, this one life, this one love. And because we are immersed in it, we must be those qualities in form, individualized as each of us. And so each of us is the life, the love, the light, the joy, the abundant good of God. Each of us is this right here, right now. Whether we know it or not, believe it or not, remember it or not, we are that. And so from this awareness, I speak my word, knowing that this word is creative, knowing that this word is the word of Spirit moving through me and through each of us. We simply say we open to the Spirit in ways beyond where we have ever opened before. We say yes deeper and more fully and more embodiedly than ever before. We have this deep communion, this whole being experience, this love-making, this joyous dance with Spirit. We engage fully. We say yes fully. We drink deeply of this draught, of this beautiful, pure, clear water of Spirit, and let it refresh us. And for this, and for all the good that comes out of this, it blesses us, and that blesses out into the world, I am so grateful. For each person here, I am so grateful. For each person who is hearing this message in the video, who hears this message in some other way, and says, yes, I am so grateful. For all the love and good, and for all that is, all beings who are working with this idea of creating a world that works for all. I'm so grateful. And so we release this word. We let it be. We let it go into a law, that process that knows how to grow it into form and expression, knowing that as we hold it in consciousness, this beautiful seed, it does grow. And it creates a beautiful, beautiful tree of life, a life that works for all. We let it be, and together we say, and so it is.